we can see the impact of this, of the state of the mind. So if someone is happy, you can tell, okay, looks like that mind is in a healthy state. If someone is unhappy, the mind might not be unhealthy, but it might be reacting, it may be stressed. And the same thing with children. So we may not be able to see the child's mind, touch it like we would in physical health, like a broken bone, but we can see what the impact of a wounded spirit is, or a bruised spirit, or a broken spirit. So this, I don't want to bore you with statistics or any kind of scientific issues. So I know this looks a bit, what's it called? It might look a bit technical, but if we look at it simply, going back to the first question I asked, things may have happened to us in childhood. And sometimes now we hear of people who talk about when they were raped as a child and they kept it to themselves. And as they grow up, it's affecting trust, it's affecting the way they behave. It might be something as small as an adult disappointing you, and you might think it's so difficult to trust people. And so this affects the way we relate socially. And that's been recognized as, experiences in childhood that might be adverse. So right from talking about the mind health of a child, we look at even right from the time the child is conceived, in pregnancy, what kind of food is the mother eating? What kind of environment is the child in? Is it an abusive environment where there's shouting and fighting and there's domestic violence? All that affects the mother's chemistry, and it would affect the child. So caring for our children, caring for their mental health starts even before they're born, for us to be in a healthy environment, in healthy relationships. Otherwise, what then happens is they have adverse experiences. It affects the brain connections. It affects the way they learn, the way they relate, the way they see things. They might see life as difficult. What's the point in living? It may then result in them resorting to alcohol, drugs, unhealthy behaviors. Sometimes it goes on so much that they now join gangs, social problems, area boys, all because of things that may have happened much earlier in life. And unfortunately, the worst scenario is early death. So mind health for our children matters very much. So we've talked about, we can't see it, we can't touch it, but it's real and it isn't the brain. We see the impact of the state of the mind. Okay, so some of the things we see in an unhealthy mind, especially with children, and like I said, the mind may be healthy, but might just be stressed. It might just be experiencing a difficult situation. So you might have a child withdrawing. Something may have happened in school. Maybe the child is being bullied. And then the child just feels, I don't want to go to school. It's not because the child doesn't want to go to school. Nobody wants to go to a stressful situation. Because each time you then mention school, the child is scared. It might even be because an older person in school is harassing the child. And sometimes even for the younger ones, you might see like a child throwing tantrums, depression. The child is unnecessarily scared. Sometimes even as simple as being scared to do schoolwork because already maybe someone has said something and the child now feels, I'm not good enough. So the child doesn't want to do schoolwork, doesn't want to engage in normal play, starts withdrawing, and then it builds up, of course, year after year, losing out on learning, losing out on healthy social interaction, not sleeping well. It takes its toll. And ultimately, the child then starts disengaging from healthy relationships. And sometimes they then find solace in bad groups because they feel warm. So as parents, these are things we need to be mindful of. Are we seeing the child behaving this way? Is the child getting easily angry, not sleeping, or sleeping too much? Is my child fearful? So we've talked about signs of an unhealthy mind, but also it's good to look at what a healthy mind looks like. A child is playing, interacting, keen to learn, wants to meet up with friends, asking questions, because if they're confident and they feel secure, they will talk to parents about their concerns and it can be addressed on time. So sometimes the things we might look at as basic as parents, listening to a child, making time out. Okay, so those things actually feed into their mental health. And what we may look at is consider the mind like you would the body. What do you feed? If your body is meant to be healthy, you look at healthy eating, exercise, rest. It's the same thing for the mind. What are we feeding the mind? Healthy information. And then as parents or older people caring for children, are we saying words that make them feel good, words that affirm them? Of course, if a child is not doing well or they're being disobedient or not complying with healthy behaviors, so, we need to address it. But we should address it in love, not in anger, because otherwise they take their cues from there. Right. So going on to caring, now we've talked about a healthy mind and signs of an unhealthy mind. Going on to caring, the most important thing is prevention. And preventing ill health, whether it's of the body or of the mind, the first thing we need to be aware, what are the signs, some of which we've talked about. How do we recognize it? And also knowing that every child is different. So being aware of a child's needs and knowing that this child is different, how do I respond to this child's needs? If my child is angry, one person might say, if my child is angry, he goes quiet. If my child is angry, he stops eating. So as parents, it's not for us to say, why are you behaving like that? It's to find out why the child, what's making this child withdraw. Because oftentimes as well, what happens with children is their language is not developed enough for them to communicate. And if a child then tells us something is happening that's upsetting them, it's important to believe them. Because sometimes when we don't, if they try to talk and we don't, they hold back. And it's in later years, those things come to the surface because they didn't have a healthy environment to communicate what was distressing them. So it's important to believe the child until you have evidence to the contrary. Otherwise, abuse may keep going on and it's affecting the child's mental health. So is there a connection problem? Sorry, I saw connecting flashing.
No, there's no connection problem.
Okay, so maybe there was a signal here that just said connecting, so I thought maybe it was.
No, I think it shows recording.
Oh, okay.
Do you still want to hear about somebody's story? There's a guy that's raised his hand.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, please.
Okay, Justin, can you unmute yourself and share with us your childhood experience?
Thank you very much.
Justin, are you there? Are you there? Let me try to unmute you. Hello, Justin.
No problem. We'll wait a little bit. I mean, while we wait for Justin, one of the things is he there now?
Okay, no, it's okay. Go ahead. He said he didn't raise his hand. I saw where he wrote, yes, I can. It's all right, go ahead.
Okay. One of the things I remember was a friend of my mom, for instance, and she promised that she will bake. I mean, it was something simple. She promised that she will bake a cake on my birthday. And I held on to it with all of my heart, looking forward to it. Wow. The cake never arrived. She changed the date. It still didn't arrive. I mean, 3 appointments about this cake and the cake never arrived. And as a child, it just made me think, should you really trust adults? Now, it didn't stop there. After that, I had another auntie who was commissioner for Girl Guides. And she said, oh, I will take you camping. Me that had never been camping. I was excited. It was like, a new experience. She was supposed to come at 2 o'clock. I still remember. 4 o'clock 2 o'clock she didn't come. 4 o'clock she didn't come. There was no communication that she wasn't going to come. And it was just like that. And as a child, I was less than 10. It made me really think, when adults say something, can we really trust them? Now, I've learned that everybody is different, but it took time to undo that. So when people say things, in my heart, I'll just hold this, it's not going to happen. So those are simple things. But then you think about other things that have happened to people where somebody, for instance, you hear about, oh, maybe the houseboy raped a child. but they're not confident enough to tell anybody in the house because parents are scared to handle these scenarios. So they would rather dismiss it. What happens to the child? They hold on to that hurt, they hold on to that trauma. And as they grow older, it affects the way they relate. And then you might find out that, oh, in certain scenarios, they just get very angry. Maybe they see things that remind them of that person. And then you just think at work, why does this person keep behaving like this towards that person? There's more to it. So a famous psychologist talked about broken children, grown-up pain. The things that break us as children, the things that hurt us as children, it's like when you have a wound, the more traumatic the wound is, the more it affects you in adulthood. So sometimes you might have one old scar, and then as an adult, it's still hurting. So caring for our children, being aware of their needs, it's just so important. So I will minimize this again. So if, like I said, if a child reports something, it's important to believe them. And then I made this like a simple ABC: awareness, belief, and communication. So a key part of caring for the child is communicating, because if you don't communicate with the child, you can't connect. Sometimes we want to correct the child. You have done this wrong, but there's no relationship. You haven't been spending the time with this child to show that you care. There's a saying that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Our children need to know that we care for them. And caring is not just because we're giving them food, or after all, I'm the one that sent you to school. Anybody else can do that. A stranger can send them to school and pay all their fees. You know, I'm the one that bought you this. Anybody can do that. A charity organization can do that for them. So yes, I know, yes, we should be appreciated for that, but these are children. They need to know if we're responsible for their well-being and we want them to grow safely and to their full potential, it's important to show our care, communicating with them, spending time with them. And it's that spending time, they know that I'm important enough for you to make out time. They know daddy is busy. They know mommy has to work. But what you're saying is you're important, that no matter what I'm doing, I have to make out this time for you. Now, if that communication is secure, if there's a problem, who else will they go to? Because they know they can trust you, because they know that they're important to you. So awareness, believing children when they speak, and communicating, because when we communicate, we can connect, and then they can feel safe. Safety, security helps to provide a good nurturing environment. Right. So